In this video, we will learn how to download and install Blender, navigate your way around the interface, optimize your options and settings, how to use different modes, find and use essential tools and quick shortcuts, build 3D models, use modifiers to test changes and redesigns without permanently changing your model, using colors, textures, and other materials to make objects come alive, add a lighting and other environmental effects, adjust the camera and set the frame, and render your image. That's a lot to take in, but don't worry, we'll go slowly step by step so that by the end of this video, you will feel completely comfortable building your first model in Blender. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Installation and Optimization. Open your web browser and go to blender.org. You'll see a big Download Blender button. It'll also have the latest version number, which at the time of recording is 5.0. Click it. Before you do anything else, make sure you download the version compatible with your operating system, Windows, Mac, or Linux. My download says Windows, installer version 5. That's correct, so I'll click Download Blender. The download shouldn't take long if you have a stable internet connection. Oh, and I almost forgot, Blender is completely free. No trial versions, no subscriptions, no watermarks. Blender belongs to everyone. Once the file is downloaded, click on it in the upper right corner to run the setup wizard. Click Next. By default, Blender should save in your C drive. I recommend keeping that as is. Click Next. Now, hit Install. You'll be asked to give Blender permission to install on your PC. Granted. Now that the installation is complete, make sure to uncheck the box next to Learn how to support Blender and hit the Finish button. Go ahead and open the app by either clicking on its logo or using the search function. Since this is the first time using Blender, you'll be asked to configure some settings, namely the language, theme, key map, mouse select, and spacebar action. Give this a quick look, but they should be correct because they're matched to your system settings. Click Continue. Now you'll see the splash screen. This window will pop up every time you open Blender from now on. This is where you will create new files, open existing ones, and access articles and guides. Behind it is the main Blender workspace. You can open it by simply clicking on the background. Front and center, you'll see a gray cube sitting on a grid. There's also a small camera and a light. You'll soon learn what they do. The interface is divided into 3 sections. The large center area is your 3D viewport. The right side holds the Properties panel, and the top bar has your menus and settings. We'll look at this in greater detail in the next chapter. First, let's make Blender easier to use. The first thing to change is the number of undo steps. Go to the top left and click Edit, Preferences, System. Look for a box labeled Undo Steps. By default, Blender remembers 32 actions, which sounds fine until you really start building. Let's increase it to 100. Click where it says 32, press the backspace key, and type 100 in its place. Hit the Enter key on your keyboard. Now you can experiment freely. Next, let's turn on GPU acceleration. Your GPU, graphics card, can render images much faster than your CPU, central processing unit. Still, inside the Preferences, System tab, look for Cycles Render Devices. You'll see options like CUDA and OptiX for NVIDIA cards, HIP for AMD, and One API for Intel. Check whichever matches your hardware. If you don't see anything, don't worry. Blender will still work using your CPU. It'll just take longer to complete your renders. Then go down to the small menu icon in the bottom left corner of the Preferences window. It has 3 horizontal lines, and click Save Preferences. Now, you will never have to do this again. If the interface text feels small, you can fix that too. Still, inside Preferences, go to Interface, Display, Resolution Scale. I'll bump mine up a little bit to 1.10. Important note before we continue. Changing resolution scale here does not affect how your 3D model looks. It only affects how readable the software is. Alright, now close the Preferences window. Now Blender is tuned and ready. Before we jump in, however, let's get you comfortable with the viewport. Chapter 2. Mastering the viewport. The viewport is the big window in the middle of your screen where all the magic happens. Everything you will ever build, move, light, or animate lives here. The viewport is your window into the 3D world, and the better you understand how to move inside it, the more natural Blender will feel. Many beginners struggle here because they try to learn tools before learning navigation, but that's like trying to paint without learning how to move your hand. So, before we make anything, let's learn how to look around. In Blender, there are 3 axes, or directions. X, side to side, indicated by the red line. Y, front to back, the green line, and Z, up and down, the blue line, which isn't visible right now. These three lines together form Blender's world, the 3D grid you see when you open a new project. The gray floor is the grid. Every object you add will sit on this invisible floor, and those red, green, and blue lines are your compass. Let's practice navigation. First, try orbiting the view. That means rotating your camera around the object, as if you're walking in a circle around it. To orbit, click and hold the middle mouse button, the scroll wheel, and move your mouse. The view should rotate around your cube. If it's not working, make sure you're holding down the middle mouse button, not the right one. If you're on a laptop without a middle mouse button, press Alt plus left mouse instead. Practice orbiting a few times and try to keep the view as steady as you can. Next, try panning the view. Hold Shift plus middle mouse. Then drag the cursor. The entire scene slides left, right up, or down. You're not rotating this time, you're moving sideways. Panning is helpful when you want to adjust your view without changing the angle. Finally, try zooming in and out. You can scroll your mouse wheel forward to zoom in or backward to zoom out. If your zoom feels too sensitive or slow, you can adjust it in Preferences. Pause the video and practice orbiting, panning, and zooming in and out for a minute. Try to keep your view as steady as possible. In the top right corner of the viewport is the axis gizmo. It looks a little like a compass. It shows the red, green, and blue arrows for X, Y, and Z. You can click on those letters to instantly snap to a specific view. Click X to look directly from the side, Y to look from the front, and Z to look from the top. You can also hover over the gizmo and drag to rotate the view interactively. If you have a keyboard with a numpad, Blender gives you even more quick views. Press 1 to switch to the front view, 3 for the right view, and 7 for the top view. To see the opposite side, hold Ctrl with those keys. Ctrl plus 1 shows the back, Ctrl plus 3 shows the left, and Ctrl plus 7 shows the bottom. If you're using a laptop or keyboard without a numpad, go to Edit, Preferences, Input, and check Emulate Numpad. It is the very first option and will make your regular numbers key function like a numpad in Blender. This is a small change that makes navigation so much easier in complex projects. Now, let's talk about shading modes. These control how your scene looks while you're working. Let's pull up a menu so we can easily switch between these. Press Z on your keyboard. A circular menu will pop up showing the 4 main shading modes: Solid, Material Preview, Wireframe, and Rendered. Simply click on a mode to switch. Now, I'll explain what each mode does while we switch to it. The default mode, called Solid, shows your object with standard lighting and color. When you're modeling, this is where you will spend most of your time. The wireframe mode makes everything transparent, showing you only the edges and corners of your objects. It's great when you want to see through your model, select something hidden inside, or check for clipping when 2 objects' boundaries collide. Then there is Material Preview, which gives you a live preview of your object's materials and lighting using Blender's EV engine. This one helps you see what your colors and materials will look like without a full render. And finally, Rendered mode gives you the real deal. It shows exactly what the camera and lights will produce when you hit render. In other words, it's slower but more accurate than Material Preview. You will use it later for final adjustments. Before we leave this chapter, let's cover one more small but useful thing: the Viewport gizmo tools. On the left side of the viewport, you'll see 3 icons: a cross with arrows, move, a circle, rotate, and a square, scale. I'll click on Move. Now the object has colored handles. The red handle moves things along the x-axis, green along the y-axis, and blue along the z-axis. Most of the time, you'll use keyboard shortcuts for speed, but these tools are great visual aids when you're still learning. Alright, now that you can move around your 3D space confidently, it's time to learn one of the most important concepts in Blender: modes. Chapter 3: Understanding Modes. Think of modes as different workspaces or states that tell Blender what you want to do with an object. Every mode changes the type of editing you can perform. The 2 modes you'll use most often are Object Mode and Edit Mode, and together they form the backbone of almost everything you will do. Once you understand modes, everything in Blender becomes logical. Let's start with Object Mode. When you first open Blender, you're already in Object Mode. In this mode, you treat objects as a whole unit. You can select it, move it, rotate it, scale it up or down, duplicate it, or delete it entirely. But you're not changing its shape or breaking it into different parts. The object remains whole. Object mode is perfect for organizing, positioning, and managing multiple objects in your scene, such as a camera, lights, or different modes. Now let's switch to edit mode, which is where the real modeling happens. Select your default cube, then press Tab on your keyboard and click the cube's corner. The dots at the corners are called vertices. If we zoom in, you'll also see orange lines connecting them, called edges, and the flat surfaces they form, called faces. These are all the components of what's called a mesh object, or a 3D shape with vertices, edges, and faces. Now, you're not moving the cube. Instead, you're reshaping it from the inside. This is where you can grab a vertex, stretch a face, or carve new details into your object. In edit mode, you can work at 3 different levels of detail: vertices, edges, and faces. Look at the top of the 3D viewport just below the top bar and to the right of edit mode. You'll see 3 small icons: a dot, a line, and a square. Click the dot to select vertex mode, the line for edge mode, or the square for face mode. You can also switch quickly using the number keys: 1 for vertices, 2 for edges, and 3 for faces. Try clicking each one while your cube is selected. When you're in vertex mode, click one corner. It turns orange to show it's selected. Press G and drag the corner out. The other modes work the same way. Switch to the mode, select the edge or face you want to adjust, and reshape it to your heart's content. Feel free to play around. Remember, you can always undo your changes by pressing Ctrl+Z. Understanding these 3 selection types is huge because nearly every modeling technique builds from them. For example, if you want to make the cube taller, you'd switch to Face Select. Click the top face, press G, and use your mouse to move it up. Pro tip: don't worry about being precise with your movements. Instead of moving your mouse after hitting G, press G, then Z instead. Now the cube's shape is locked, enabling you to move the face up or down without changing its dimensions. We will see more of this shortcut called Axis Lock in the next chapter. Something else that's important: lights and cameras can enter edit mode. That's because edit mode only works on mesh objects with vertices, edges, and faces. Cameras and lights are special object types called non-mesh object types. A quick note about visibility: when you're in edit mode, you might only be able to select visible parts of your model. If you can't select something on the far side of the cube, look at the top bar and turn on the X-ray icon, 2 overlapping squares. This lets you see and select through the object, which is especially helpful when modeling complex shapes. Toggle it on and off as needed. So, to recap, object mode is for controlling whole objects, moving, rotating, scaling, etc. Edit mode is for shaping and sculpting those objects, adjusting vertices, edges, and faces. Switching between the 2 is as simple as pressing Tab. So now that you can move around with ease and understand the difference between object and edit modes, let's introduce some of Blender's basic tools. Chapter 4: Essential Tools and Shortcuts. You will use the tools and shortcuts we will cover in this chapter every time you boot up Blender. They are the foundations of 3D modeling. Interestingly, there aren't that many of them. We'll go through each one carefully, explain what it does, and give you small exercises to practice. Before we start, however, I'll quickly tell you how to customize the menus, panels, and toolbars to your liking. It's easy. Simply place your cursor on their edge and resize to your heart's content. If you accidentally mess up or decide you want a hard reset, then click File in the top left, open Defaults, and select Load Factory Settings. Easy enough. Alright, enough of that. Let's start talking about tools and shortcuts. Let's start with the menu search shortcut, F3. Hitting this key brings up a menu where you can search for any tool you will need. It's a great way to save time if you don't know the keybinds for a specific tool. Now, let's look at the toolbar. Look at the left side of your 3D viewport. You'll see a vertical bar with icons: select box, cursor, move, rotate, scale, and more. You can press T to show or hide this at any time. You can click these icons to use tools visually, but as you'll quickly learn, keyboard shortcuts are faster and more precise. Blender is built for speed, and pros use the keyboard constantly because it keeps the creative flow uninterrupted. The first and most common tool is Move. Select your cube, then press G. Move your mouse to watch the cube follow. Click to confirm, or right-click or press Escape to cancel. You can move objects freely, or you can restrict them to one axis. After pressing G, press X, Y, or Z to enable axis lock, restricting movement to a single axis. Don't forget to use axis lock consistently to control your modeling. To move something a specific distance, you can type a number. For example, G, Z, 1 moves your object up exactly 1 unit. Every action in Blender can be performed numerically, which can help make your first, simpler builds easier. Next, let's rotate. Press R to rotate your cube. Move your mouse, and you'll see it spinning around. Precision is hard if you just try to freestyle it. Luckily, just as with moving, you can lock rotation to a single axis. Try RX, and the cube will only spin around a direction. The third major tool is Scale, activated by pressing S. Move your mouse to grow or shrink your object. You can also lock scaling to one axis the same way. S, then X, will lock you to the X axis. These three tools, grab, rotate, and scale, are the core of almost every operation in Blender. With them, you can position anything exactly how you want. Now, it's time to talk about A. Make sure you are in object mode, then press A. It highlights every mesh and non-mesh object in the scene. Pressing Alt plus A deselects all objects. Switch to edit mode by pressing Tab. Press A and it will select all vertices, edges, or faces, depending on the set mode. Once again, Alt plus A deselects all. Now, we'll jump into real modeling tools, the ones that actually shape your object's geometry. These only work in edit mode, so let's stay here. First up is Extrude. Set face mode. Click on a face on your cube and press E. Move your mouse and you will see the face pull out, creating new geometry connected to the original shape. Click to confirm. Extrude adds depth and complexity. You can extrude along a specific axis too. Try E, then Z to extrude straight up. When you're done, hit Ctrl plus Z to undo the changes. Next, let's inset. With a face selected, press I. A smaller face appears inside the old one, surrounded by new edges. This is great for creating borders, panels, or any detail that sits slightly inside another area. Move your mouse to adjust the inset size. Click to confirm and hit Ctrl plus Z to return the cube to its original shape. Now, let's add more geometry using Loop Cut. Press Ctrl plus R. While hovering over your object, you'll see a yellow line appear wrapping around the shape. That's a loop cut. It's adding a new edge that runs all the way around your model. Loop cuts are the secret to controlling how your model bends, smooths, or deforms later. To smooth corners, you can use the bevel. Make sure you're in edge mode. Select an edge, then press Ctrl plus B. Move your mouse to see the edge split. Scroll up to increase the number of segments for a softer curve. Beveling is useful for giving your models a realistic look. In the real world, no edge is perfectly sharp. Even a tiny bevel makes your renders look more natural. Pro tip: you can also duplicate something by selecting it and pressing Shift plus D. You can duplicate entire objects in object mode or vertices, edges, and faces using edit mode. One final but important shortcut: press Ctrl plus A to apply transforms. When you scale, rotate, or move an object in object mode, Blender tracks those changes separately from its geometry. In other words, beveling or changing a mesh object in edit mode might not be reflected properly in object mode because the different modes believe the same object is in a slightly different location, and this can lead to issues later. Applied transforms resyncs an object's precise location across all modes while preserving its changed geometry. In essence, it bakes in those changes. Before wrapping up this chapter, let's talk about smoothing. Switch to object mode, right-click your cube, and choose Shade Smooth. Now Blender is averaging the way light hit the surface. It's a trick for making things look smooth without adding more geometry. If you want to return to the blocky look, right-click again and choose Shade Flat. Remember, shading smoothly doesn't change your shape. Beveling does. You'll use both depending on whether you want visual or real smoothness. That's a lot of new tools, but don't worry, they'll become second nature quickly. Now that you've got the core tools under your belt, it's time to create your very first real project. Chapter 5. Building your first model. To start, we're going to model something simple, fun, and forgiving: a chocolate chip cookie. The goal isn't perfection. Is to get your hands moving, make mistakes, and understand what modeling feels like. A cookie is perfect because it doesn't need to be symmetrical or precise. It's a natural shape with room for creative freedom. You will use everything you've learned so far: moving, scaling, extruding, and beveling. Start fresh by opening a new Blender file. Go to File, New, General, Don't Save. Alright, now you'll see that same default cube staring back at you. Select it, press X, and hit Delete. It's gone. With a clean canvas, let's create our cookie base. Press Shift+A to open the Add menu. Hover over Mesh and choose UV Sphere. Now, to turn this sphere into a cookie, we need to split it in half. We'll click the Axis gizmo in the upper right corner, then press Z and move our cursor over to the left and hit -X. Now switch to Edit mode by hitting Tab. Click off the sphere. Now we'll use something called Box Select. Hit B and carefully drag your cursor so the bottom half of the sphere is selected. You'll want your cursor to be slightly beneath the midpoint of the sphere. Now press X to open the Delete menu. Then click Vertices. Repeat the process to delete the rest of the sphere below the green Y-axis. Now we need to shape the cookie. Press A to select the rest of our sphere. Press S to scale. Then hit Z to keep scaling, locked to the Z-axis. Flatten out the sphere and make it, well, more cookie-shaped. When you're done with that, hit A again and make the cookie a bit bigger. I'm going to make it about 1.5 times as big and click when I'm done. Next, let's reshape our cookie to feel more organic. I'm going to switch to Edge mode and zoom in here. I'll also look at the underside of the cookie. For the next edit, I want to select the entire bottom edge rather than just a single edge. So I'll hold down the left Alt key and click on a section of the edge. That will select all of it. Now press E to extrude and S to scale. Move the bottom edge in a little bit. Now let's repeat the process one more time until there's a small circular hole left in the bottom of the cookie. It's time to fill the cookie. To do that, I'll hit F3 to pull up menu search. Type in grid and select grid fill. Now, rather than creating a hollow cookie, it's realistic. It looks good, but I still want to make sure my cookie is symmetrical and the faces on the top and bottom are the same size. To do that, we need to add a loop cut. Hold down the middle mouse button and adjust your perspective so you're looking at the cookie from the bottom. Press Ctrl+R and you will see a yellow ring appear. We want to keep everything consistent throughout, so scroll up twice with your mouse wheel. Good. Now click twice in quick succession. There. That should give us a better, rounder cookie. Time to move it back to the axis. To do that, I'll hold down left Alt and click the bottom edge. Now I'll hit Shift+S and choose Cursor to select it. Now, that's in the middle of our cookie. Time to set that point as the cookie's origin points. Switch out of Edit mode and go back to Object mode. Click on Object, hover over Set Origin, and select Origin to 3D Cursor. Look to the right, and under Transform, change the first Z value to 0 and hit Enter. Cookies are not perfect though. To add some irregularity, hit Tab to switch back into Edit mode. Press A to select all vertices, then go back to the top of your screen and choose Mesh, then Transform, then Randomize. That will give your cookie a more realistic look, and you can always control how much randomness to apply by expanding the Randomize panel in the bottom left. The randomization amount is 0.1 em, which is good because a small amount makes it look bumpy, like real dough. Now, let's add chocolate chips. Press Shift+A and select ICO sphere. This is way too large. Press S to scale it down. There's no right answer on the size here. Feel free to eyeball it. If you want to follow along, go to Resize in the bottom left and set 0.139 em across the board. Now, chocolate chips are not perfectly round either though. With the ICO sphere still selected, go to the top of your screen and choose Mesh, then Transform, and then Randomize. Play around with the seeds, randomly generate configurations of your vertices at the bottom of the Randomize menu until you find the one you like. I'll be using seed 12. Time to give this chocolate chip a home. With it selected, press G and drag and drop it wherever you like. Once you find a spot you like, you have two options. The first is to press Shift+D to duplicate it and scatter copies across the cookie. You can also press Alt+D instead of Shift+D to create linked duplicates, meaning all the chips share the same data. This will be useful if you want to change their shapes later. I'll do this manually so the chips look unique and realistic. I'll press Shift+D and scatter them across the cookie, moving them randomly using R and G so they look naturally placed. Real chocolate chips sink a bit into the cookie when baked, so we're going to mimic that, pressing G to manually sink each chip into the dough at different angles. Pro tip: this can get a bit tedious. If you want to get a better view or move a chip that's completely floating above the cookie, consider swapping shaders in the upper right corner. For example, using wireframe will help you make sure you grab all the vertices of a chocolate chip. Take your time and be creative. Alright, now that you've got the foundations of a cookie, it's time to talk about organization. Look at the top right corner. That's the outliner. You'll see a list of all the objects in your scene. Double-click their names to rename them to something clear, like cookie base and chip 01, chip 02, and so on. Naming might seem unnecessary now, but when your projects get bigger, it's a lifesaver. Now, you notice how none of our chocolate chips actually show up in the list here? That was by design. I want to show you how to easily separate objects at any time. Make sure you're in edit mode and face select. Select one of the faces on one of the chocolate chips. It doesn't matter which one. Now, right-click the face, expand separate, and select by loose parts. Now, all our different spheres are listed as their own objects in the outliner. This worked because none of the individual chocolate chips is part of the original sphere. Instead, they were grafted on individually. In other words, they're loose parts. Now, rename each one. There we go. We still are not done though. Let's soften the cookie to reduce its sharpness. Switch back to object mode by pressing Tab. Right-click the cookie and select Shade Smooth. At this point, take a step back, literally zoom out, and admire your first Blender creation. You modeled an object from scratch using only simple shapes and transformations. You learned how to use scaling, extrusion, insetting, loop cuts, and smoothing to turn a sphere into something recognizable. Now save your project with Ctrl+S. Call it something like Cookie Project. Blender saves everything in a single file. Your models, materials, lights, and cameras all live inside that one file. Later, when you reopen it, your entire scene will be right where you left it. Now it's time to take what we've created and use modifiers to make our cookie look even better. Chapter 6. The Modifier Magic. Blender has a special feature called Modifiers, and once you understand them, your workflow will never be the same. Modifiers are like digital filters. They let you change your model in powerful ways without permanently altering it. They're non-destructive, meaning you can turn them on or off at any time, tweak their settings, or remove them completely. This lets you experiment freely without worrying about messing up your model. Look on the right side of your screen for the small wrench icon. That's the Modifiers tab. Select your cookie base, click the wrench, and you'll see a big button labeled Add Modifier. Click it and check them out. There are far too many for us to go through them all, but let's start with the Mirror modifier. Open Generate and select Mirror. This modifier automatically creates symmetrical models. To see how it works, delete half of your cookie for demonstration. Don't worry, undo it later. In edit mode, switch the viewport to wireframe, select half the vertices with box select, and press X, then vertices. Now go to the mirror modifier and make sure to select the axis you want mirrored, Y in this case. Instantly you will see your missing half appear again. You can save a mirrored model by switching to object mode, left-clicking modifier under collection, and clicking apply at the top of the modifier to make the changes permanent. Head back to edit mode and undo the damage by pressing Ctrl+Z to make your cookie whole again. Next, let's explore the array modifier. This one duplicates your object in a straight line or grid automatically. It's great for repeating shapes like wheels, fence posts, or yes, rows of cookies. Select the cookie and go to Add Modifier, then Generate, and then Array. You will see 3 copies of the cookie appear side by side. In the modifier panel, you'll find Count, how many copies, and Offset method, how far apart the objects are. The array modifier is a huge time saver when you need precision repetition. Hit Ctrl+Z to undo. The third one we will try is the Boolean modifier. This modifier allows you to combine or subtract shapes from one another. Think of it like sculpting with clay. It has 3 modes: difference, union, and intersect. Let's test it by biting a hole into the cookie. First, add a new mesh. Shift+A, mesh, and then UV sphere. Scale it down with S and use G to position it so it intersects the cookie's edge. Now select your cookie. Go to Add Modifier, then Generate, and then Boolean. Change the operation to difference and select the sphere as the target object. Instantly, you'll see a bite carved out of your cookie. To make it permanent, click Apply on the modifier and then delete the sphere. There you go, a cookie with a bite. Undo everything once again by pressing Ctrl+Z. Notice how none of these modifiers actually changed the geometry until you clicked Apply. That's what makes them so powerful. You can stack multiple modifiers, reorder them, and toggle them on or off anytime. Keep playing with these three. They're simple, but they open up infinite possibilities once you start combining them. Chapter 7. Organize and manage objects. By now, your scene is starting to look more complex. You've got your cookie base and multiple chocolate chips. This is the point where most beginners start to feel a little overwhelmed. Not because Blender gets harder, but because the scene starts getting messy. We already touched on how to do this earlier, but let's take a closer look now. Let's start with the outliner, that panel in the top right corner of Blender. The outliner lists everything in your scene. Every object, light, camera, or collection shows up there. We already saw the rule of good organization in Chapter 5. Rename everything. You can also group related items together using collections. Think of collections as folders. Blender automatically creates one cold collection when you start a new project, but you can make more. You can right-click in the outliner and choose New Collection. Double-click on it and give it a new name. I'll call it Chips. Now I'll drag and drop all the chips into this collection. Next to each collection's name, you can see icons and numbers telling you what type of objects and how many of each is being stored. You can also collapse or expand each collection using the small arrow beside its name. And you can even hide or show entire collections by clicking the eye icon. For example, clicking the eye next to chips hides all the chocolate chips, letting us easily make changes to the cookie if we want. Now, let's talk about the sidebar. Press N on your keyboard to open it. The sidebar is broken into 4 different tabs: Item, Tool, View, and Animation. Item contains numeric values for location, rotation, scale, and dimensions. This is where you go when you need precision. For example, I'll change my X dimension to 3, Y to 2.5, and Z to 0.5. I'll also switch all my scales to 1 except for Z, which I'll set to 1.1. Since I made changes here, I need to press Ctrl+A, apply all transforms. Keeping your dimensions, scale, and transforms clean ensures modifiers and lighting behave predictably. Another powerful organization trick is to use layers of visibility within the viewport. No, I'm not talking about the different shades we used back in Chapter 5. If your scene starts feeling cluttered, you can temporarily isolate an object by selecting it and pressing / on your keyboard. For example, I'll click on the cookie itself and do it. That activates local view, hiding the chips and letting me focus on the cookie itself. Pressing the / again removes local view. After you build an object, you want to center or realign it. To move an object back to the middle of your scene, select it and press Alt-G. That resets its position to 0 on all axes. Alt+R resets rotation, and Alt+S resets scale. Next, let's save your progress, and I mean really save it. Press Ctrl+S to save, but then press Shift+Ctrl+S to save as. This lets you create version files like cookie v1, cookie v2, etc. That way, if you ever make a big mistake, you can go back to an earlier version. Instead of losing hours of tedious progress, you'll only lose minutes. Once you get into the habit of keeping things neat, you'll find Blender feels far less intimidating. Alright, your scene is tidy, your names are clear, and the project is ready. It's time to bring things to life with color and texture. Chapter 8. Materials and Colors. Let's get right to it. Start by selecting your cookie base. On the right side of your screen, click the Material Properties tab. It's the red sphere icon at the bottom of the list. Click New to create your first one. A new material appears called Material. Let's rename it Cookie Matte. Right away, you'll notice a large panel filled with sliders and color boxes. This is Blender's principled all-purpose shader. At the top of the panel, click the Base Color bar. A color wheel appears. You can either pick a color using the color wheel above, or you can use instead a hexadecimal or hex number for a specific color. That's what I'll do. The code will flash on the screen now. You can watch the perfect color take shape in real time. Press Z, then Material Preview. Next, adjust roughness. This controls how shiny or matte the surface is. A value of 1 means very rough, no reflections, while 0 is mirror-like. For a cookie, something like 0.7 or 0.8 feels right, soft and slightly porous. Leave metallic at 0 since cookies are not metal. Let's add a material for the chocolate chips. Select one chip, click New in the Material tab, and rename it Chip Matte. Now follow the same steps. In this case, I'll go with the hex for black, which will pop on screen now. Then lower the roughness to 0.3. This will give it a glossy, melted chocolate look. Rather than going through and setting each chip individually, shift-click on all of the chips. Make sure you end up back on the one that's got the right color. Now press Ctrl+L. Link materials. This links all the selected objects to use the same material, so if you ever change it later, they'll all update automatically. You can also tweak how light interacts with materials in more detail. Under the specular setting, you can adjust how strong highlights appear. For realistic lighting, don't go too extreme. Small tweaks to the IOR level make a big difference. I'll change mine to 0.3. Now, let's talk about how to view your materials properly. Blender gives you multiple shading modes. We touched on these earlier. Solid, wireframe, material preview, and rendered. When working with colors and materials, use material preview most of the time. It's fast and shows real lighting without it fully rendering. When you want to check the final quality, switch to rendered mode. You've just given your cookie its first taste of realism, and it already looks 100 times better. But something's still missing: lighting and a background. And that's what we will set up next. Chapter 9. Lighting and Environment. Now that your cookie and chocolate chips have materials, it's time to make them look real. Good lighting is the difference between a dull render and something that feels alive. Let's dive in. When you start a new scene in Blender, it automatically includes a default point light. It's a small spherical light that emits light equally in all directions. To see how it affects your scene, switch to rendered view by pressing Z, then rendered. You will notice how the cookie suddenly has shadows and highlights. Try selecting the light, click it or pick it from the G, then press G to move it around. You have to be in object mode to move lights. As you move it closer, the cookie brightens. Move it farther away and it darkens. Lights in Blender behave very much like real-world lights. The closer they are, the stronger their effects. But for most scenes, a single point light isn't ideal. It's too small and creates harsh shadows. Let's replace it with the sun. Press X to delete the old point light. Then press Shift+A, Lights, and then Sun. There we go. In the Properties panel on the right, you can open the Light Properties tab. It looks like a green light bulb to change the light's temperature, color, strength, and exposure. Let's brighten the scene a little by switching to strength from 1 to 1.6. We will also increase the exposure from 0 to 0.2. Pro tip: in Blender, a general rule is this: the larger the light, the softer the shadows it will cast. We're still not done though. Our cookie needs something to sit on. Let's add a plane to act as the ground. Press Shift+A, then Mesh, then Plane. You'll see a flat square appear. Press S and scale it up to the size of a napkin. Make sure it's centered under the cookie. Go to the Materials Properties tab, click New. I'll use the code that pops up on the screen to create a light gray napkin. For some realism, let's add some environment lighting. In Blender, the world itself emits light using the World shader. This acts like the sky. Go to the World Properties tab, the red Earth icon on the right sidebar. Under Surface, you'll see a color option labeled Background. This controls the overall ambient light in your scene. By default, this is a dark gray. Play around with the lighting to find a color scheme that you think fits, or leave it as is. Though this is outside the scope of today's tutorial, I want to introduce you to HDRIs, or High Dynamic Range Images. These are panoramic photos of real environments that you can wrap around your scene, creating natural reflections and lighting. To use one in the same World Properties area, click the yellow dot next to Color, choose Environment Texture, and then load an HDRI file from your computer. You can download free HDRIs from websites like Polyhaven or HDRI Haven, and they seamlessly integrate. Lighting can completely transform your work. Even a simple cookie becomes cinematic with the right setup. It's all about balancing light, shadow, and reflection. Lighting, however, is only part of the equation. Chapter 10. Camera and Framing. So, you've built your model, given it materials, and set up beautiful lighting. Now it's time to look at your scene through the lens of a camera, because everything you render comes from the camera's perspective. Without it, Blender doesn't know what part of your scene to capture. Framing and composition make your render feel intentional. Select the camera from the outliner and press 0 on your numpad. This switches your viewport to camera view, showing exactly what the camera sees. You'll notice a black border, or orange if you're using dark mode, around your view. That's your render frame. Everything inside it will be visible in your final image. You can move the camera just like any other objects. G to move, R to rotate, and G plus Z or R plus X to adjust specific axis. But moving it manually can feel clumsy. Instead, let's make it move more naturally. Open the sidebar with N, go to the View tab, and check the Lock Camera to View box. Now you can move the camera by orbiting, panning, and zooming the same way you normally navigate in the viewport. You're basically holding the camera in your hands, walking around your scene. Once you've framed your shot, uncheck Lock Camera to View to prevent it from moving again. Now, think like a photographer. A slight angle adds visual interest. Straight-on shots often look flat. That's why I have the slightly elevated shot at a 30-ish degree angle. If your cookie looks too close or too far, adjust the focal length. In the Camera Properties tab, green camera icon, you'll see a field labeled Focal Length. By default, this will be set to 50mm. Higher values, over 85, zoom in and compress space, good for product shots, while lower values, under 25, create a wide, dynamic look. I want to zoom in a bit more and get a more detailed shot, so I'll zoom into 70mm. Depth of field is another tool that adds realism. Scroll down on the same panel and enable depth of field. Then expand depth of field, click the eyedropper icon next to focus object, and select your cookie. You'll see cookie base appear in the box. Good. If you want to check how your image will look when rendered, press Z, then rendered while still in camera view. You'll see all the materials, lights, and shadows as the camera does. This is where you can make small adjustments. Framing your render well is as much about feeling as it is about math. Don't overthink it. Once you're happy with the composition, it's time for the grand finale, creating your final render. Chapter 11, rendering your image. To make sure we're all on the same page, rendering is when Blender takes everything you've created and transforms it into a finished, realistic image. It calculates lights, shadows, reflections, and textures to produce your final picture. Let's start by choosing the render engine. Blender offers several engines, each with its own strengths. Click on the Render Properties tab on the right side of your screen. It's the small camera icon. At the very top, you'll see a drop-down menu labeled Render Engine. The two most common options are Eve and Cycles. Eve is Blender's real-time renderer. It's fast, lightweight, and perfect for previews or animations where speed matters. It doesn't simulate light as accurately as a ray-traced engine, but it's surprisingly good. Cycles, on the other hand, is Blender's physically based ray tracing engine. It calculates light bounces and reflections more realistically, giving you photorealistic results. For this cookie project, we'll use Cycles to get beautiful, soft shadows and realistic highlights. Select Cycles as your render engine. Below Render Engine, you'll see an option labeled Device. This determines whether Blender uses your CPU or GPU for rendering. If your computer has a dedicated graphics card, choose GPU Compute. GPUs are designed for parallel processing and can render scenes much faster than CPUs. If you don't have a supported GPU, you can leave it on CPU. It'll still work, just a bit slower, and your computer will probably stutter for a second or two. Next is sampling. This controls the number of samples Blender takes per pixel. More samples mean cleaner, less noisy images, but longer render times. For our simple project, keeping the settings as is will be more than enough. Before rendering, let's check our output settings. Click the Output Properties tab, the printer icon. Here you can choose your image size, format, and file location. The default resolution is 1920 by 1080 pixels, Full HD. That's perfect for YouTube, tutorials, or general use. But if you want a square image for social media, you can change it to 1080 by 1080. You can also increase it to 3840 by 2160 4K for ultra-high detail. Under frame range, make sure both start and end frames are set to 1 if you're rendering a still image. Then under Output, click the folder icon to choose where your render will be saved. I recommend creating a new folder on your desktop and naming it Renders. For file format, choose PNG for a high-quality, transparent image, or JPEG for a smaller file size. Remember, increasing the pixel count and choosing a PNG will increase render time and complexity. Everything's ready. Time to render. Go to the top of your screen and click Render, then Render Image, or simply press F12. Blender will switch to a new window showing your render progress. You'll see it draw the image tile by tile. Depending on your computer's power and render settings, this could take a few seconds or a few minutes. There we go. To save it, go to the top left menu of the render window and click Image, Save As. Choose your file location and name it something clear, like Cookie Render. Click Save As Image and you're done. You just rendered your first Blender project. And that's it. I hope this Blender tutorial was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.